Okay, Amel Boubacar, you had a statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, it will. I mean, it will be absolutely unfortunate if the interesting issues that this discourse is raising, such as the fight against terrorism and radicalization, which should be a common fight. I mean, between again Muslims and non-Muslims, observant and non-observant Muslims, and so on. It will be absolutely unfortunate if this issue became a kind of argument for people to make more Islamophobic statements or to show with their finger the Muslim communities as threatening communities for European or French values, because it's not the case. And we have a lot of interesting and successful cases of Muslim integrations, even observant Muslims who are fully integrated to their European secular societies. But it is true that, to answer your first question, that it's also fashionable in some way to speak about Islam as a problem. I think personally that Islam is never a problem or a solution, actually. It's just that Muslims are maybe facing some concrete and timely issues around the question of violence and terrorism. But we should also not forget that they are, in the majority of cases, the first victims of it.
Irshad, did you have a comment?
That's right.
Go ahead.
Simply that, once again, Amel hits the nail on the head when she points out that Muslims are first and foremost the victims of Islamist violence. And that is why, when we speak up for human rights in Islam, it is absolutely not racist or Islamophobic or discriminatory in any way to be supporting reform-minded Muslims. After all, the people they are protecting by insisting on using free conscience are Muslims themselves. So, this doesn't have to be an us versus them issue. It doesn't have to be about non-Muslims versus Muslims. What we're talking about here are universal values, exactly. Rationality, individuality, humanity.
Okay. Abed Ayoub, I'd like to ask you a specific question, since you are a legal advisor yourself. I know you have a concern with if you start calling for the taxpayer-funded protection of people who speak on more radical or extremist terms or otherwise. Where do you draw the line? What kind of precedent does it set? Expand on that, if you will. What are your legal concerns in this issue?
My concerns are, and I'll put any religion aside, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, in 10 years you get an individual coming out and speaking against Buddhism and Buddhist. Is he going to be expecting the same sort of security? What if individuals just start speaking, shooting off the hip and demanding this support? Where do you draw the line on how much you're going to give, where you're going to give, and who's protected? Well, let's say hypothetically speaking, yes.
Are the Buddhists trying to kill him?
In our own hypothetical world.
Well, it's a real big
hypothetical world. Well, that's why we're speaking in hypotheticals. So if the Buddhists are trying to kill him, if anybody's trying to kill him, where do we draw? Where do we draw? My question is where do we draw the line?
Well, we draw the line at a real threat. How about dealing with a real threat instead of absurd hypotheticals? And the real threat is, Theo van Gogh was murdered by a man who stuck Quran verses and names of other politicians on his body. And so does the Dutch government then decide to protect those people or to let them ultimately suffer the same fate? And that is ultimately a question that strikes at the very heart of what kind of a society the Netherlands is and what kind of society Western societies are in general, whether they're going to have this protected class that's above all criticism and above all questioning, or whether it's going to allow for and protect and pay the price of protecting freedom of inquiry, freedom of conscience, and free debate.
Taxpayers want to know how much is this going to cost me and what am I paying and to who am I paying. And speaking, I've never been to France, I'd love to visit, but taxpayers are going to want to know.
Can I?
Sure.
Go ahead, Irshad.
Can I use a quick analogy here? Because, Abed keeps focusing on taxpayer money. Well, Abed, do you believe that violence against women is wrong? Do you believe, for example, that a woman who is in an abusive marriage where her husband has actually threatened her life deserves to be protected by the police? Would you say that she deserves that protection even at the cost of the taxpayer?
Of course, and I did pro bono work for domestic abuse victims, domestic violence victims for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
I know, and I'm really into that issue. However, and you want to speak in this country, they have police protection. They have police protection. They have protection of the neighborhood policing department. that everybody else has, that everybody else can go to, the police, the FBI, whoever they may want to go to in this country. We're not fronting bills to cover
but the point
domestic abuse victims every time there is one.
But the point is, Abid, that we only got to this point of actually giving protection to abused women precisely because individuals decided to stand up and say, excuse me, but there is never an excuse to threaten, individuals with violence merely for speaking up about their rights. And so we were not at that point yet with Islam, but we certainly got to that point with feminism. Maybe you're just behind the times, Abid. Maybe you fail to see the connection between these two situations.
I don't see the connection between the two situations. I'm sorry.
I know you don't. Well, look, but I think that you better catch up soon, my friend.
And I don't think taxpayers see the directions either.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Robert Spencer, quick comment.
You were talking before about. Yeah, you're talking before about Buddhism and saying, what if somebody starts speaking up against Buddhism? This doesn't happen in a vacuum. We should not lose sight of the fact that there have been over 10,000 violent attacks by Muslims committed in the name of Islam since 9/11. And so that has to be addressed. Of course it was a hypothetical, but the point is these things don't happen in a vacuum. Ayaan Hirsi Ali is not asking for protection in a vacuum. She's really threatened.
We have to stand up against these violence, which we said at the beginning. We're all for debate. We're all for speaking up. That's what brings these ideas to life and makes change. However, the issue at heart here is...
But you're not for creating an environment in which individuals can speak up.
No, they can speak up.
You say that you're all for debate, but you're not for creating an environment.
There are other ways for her to get security. There are other ways to allow for the debate, to get security, and to be safe.
She's been working on this in 3 nations now, and so I don't know that these other ways are all really that obvious.
Yeah, exactly. And in any event.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I'm going to interrupt at this point because we're down to actually our last minute. And Irshad, I'd like to close with you because you talk about this woman specifically, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, bringing something into debate, bringing Islam into the forum of debate, calling for change. The truth is, she really isn't calling for change. She really isn't calling for reform of Islam. She's kind of calling for an end to Islam. So I'd just like to get clarity on where you stand specifically about this woman's ideals.
I think that she contradicts herself, and I'm the first person to acknowledge that, Andrea. Again, I speak from within Islam when I say that I do believe that Muslims can be reformed, and like Amel said, Islam is what we make of it. But the point simply is this, that when more individuals, break deadly silences, that gives other reform-minded Muslims the permission to speak up as well, because then they know that they are not alone. They know that they can be faithful and thoughtful at the same time. And that is the point that we need to reach. Whether it's Ayaan doing this, whether it's Irshad Manji doing this, whether it's Amel doing this, or Robert Spencer, everybody needs to get on board about the need for debate. And what Abid is saying is that, sure, debate is great, but we can't create an environment in which it can happen. That is fundamentally contradictory and unacceptable in a free society.
Okay, Irshad Manji, I'm going to let you have the last word because unfortunately we are completely out of time for this edition of the debate. I'd like to thank our panelists so much for joining us tonight. That is all for this edition. Another tomorrow. Do join us then. Bonsoir.